intrigued him. He was used to people putting on airs, trying to impress or manipulate him. But here was someone who seemed completely indifferent to the politics of the banquet. She simply looked hungry. He took a few steps toward her, curious about what she was doing at such an exclusive event. She didn't notice his approach, still too busy loading up her plate with delicate pastries, savory meats, and colorful fruits. "Is the food really that good?" Marcus asked, his voice light, but with a touch of amusement. The woman looked up, startled, as if she had been lost in her own world. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of surprise in them. She swallowed her bite of food before speaking.
"I'm just here for the free food," she said with a grin, as if the statement was the most natural thing in the galaxy.
Marcus's lips twitched into a smile. He hadn't expected that answer.
It was bold, refreshing even, considering the polished veneer of the guests around him. "Is that so?" he asked, his interest piqued. "You don't seem like the type to come to a banquet just for the food." The woman shrugged nonchalantly, her eyes scanning the room before returning to him.
"Why not?"
"I mean, it's free, isn't it?" she said, taking another bite of her meal without a hint of hesitation. Marcus chuckled softly, unable to suppress his amusement. There was something charming about her, despite her apparent lack of concern for the formalities that everyone else in the room held so dear. It was almost as if she was a child who had wandered into the adult world, completely unafraid of the rules that governed it. "So, tell me, what's your name?" Marcus asked, his curiosity growing. "You don't exactly seem like you belong here." The woman's eyes sparkled with humor, but there was something more beneath the surface. She was clearly a person of interest, and Marcus couldn't help but wonder how someone like her had made her way into this exclusive event.
"Lyra,"
she replied simply, as if she was telling him the most ordinary thing in the world.
"And as for whether I belong here?"
"I'm not sure I do, but the food's great. So, I'm staying." Marcus raised an eyebrow at her bluntness. Most people would have been offended by the question of whether they belonged at such an important event, but Lyra seemed completely unfazed. She didn't care about the status, the power, or the expectations of the people around her. She was just there. "You're an unusual one, aren't you?" Marcus said, intrigued. "I'm sure you've seen plenty of people who think they're important," Lyra said with a casual smile. "I'm just here for the food." No pretense, no agendas, just food. Marcus laughed again, the sound surprising even himself. It had been a long time since anyone had amused him like this, and for some reason, Lyra's frankness felt like a breath of fresh air in a room filled with calculated smiles and hidden motives. There was something genuine about her, something rare, and it made him want to know more. "I'll be honest with you," Marcus said, leaning in slightly. "This banquet is filled with a lot of people who have far more important things on their minds than food." Lyra looked at him, her expression thoughtful for a moment. "And here I thought this whole thing was just an excuse for people to flaunt their wealth and power. Seems pretty obvious to me." It was Marcus's turn to look surprised. Most people wouldn't dare speak so frankly in such a setting, but Lyra seemed to thrive on it. She didn't seem intimidated at all by the grand spectacle around her, or the man standing before her, who was known throughout the galaxy for his influence.
"You're not from around here, are you?" Marcus asked, his tone shifting slightly, the curiosity in his eyes deepening. Lyra smiled, a playful glint in her eyes.
"You could say that. I'm just passing through." "Passing through?" Marcus echoed. "This doesn't seem like the kind of event you just pass through. People come here for all sorts of reasons, but most of them are looking for something. Power, influence, connections." Lyra's grin widened. "And I'm here for the food." Marcus studied her for a long moment, trying to make sense of this woman who seemed so out of place yet so completely at ease in her own skin. Her eyes, though, told a different story. There was more to her than she let on. something hidden beneath her playful facade, something that made Marcus think that this was no ordinary woman.
Fair enough,
he said, breaking the silence.
But I think we can both agree that food isn't the only thing that brings people together here. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly as if she was sizing him up. You're right.
But I think it's the only thing I'm interested in right now. Marcus couldn't help but be impressed by her.
She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, to push against the expectations of the people around her. She was like a wild card in a room full of players who knew all the rules. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus found himself genuinely curious about someone beyond their status or position.
So, Lyra, he said, his voice soft but intrigued.
What is it that you're really here for? She paused for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sly smile, she took another bite of her food and said, I'm here to see what you're really made of, CEO. I think you've got a lot more to offer than just fancy banquets and expensive food. But I'm not in any hurry to figure that out. Marcus blinked in surprise. The words hung in the air, charged with an energy he hadn't expected. There was something about Lyra that made him feel as if he were standing at the edge of a mystery he wasn't sure he was ready to solve.
Well, Lyra, Marcus said slowly, you certainly know how to keep a man on his toes.
She grinned again, clearly enjoying his reaction.
That's the idea! The banquet hall was filled with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Marcus Arion stood near the edge of the room, his attention now entirely on Lyra.
She had drawn him in with her simple yet bold demeanor, and he couldn't quite shake the feeling that there was more to her than she let on. While others around him exchanged pleasantries and made small talk, Lyra was still standing near the buffet table, calmly finishing off yet another plate of food. Her behavior was completely at odds with the polished nature of the event. Most guests here wouldn't dream of openly admitting that they were there for something as mundane as food. But Lyra seemed unaffected by the pressure to conform, and that intrigued Marcus more than he cared to admit. He approached her again, this time with a less playful tone. There was something about her presence that made him feel both curious and unsettled, as if she were a puzzle that needed solving.
You really do have a way of making an impression, Marcus said as he walked up, his voice low enough that only she could hear him.
Most people wouldn't even dream of acting the way you do here. Lyra glanced up at him, a slight smirk playing on her lips as she finished the last bite of her dessert. And that's exactly why I do it. Everyone else is pretending to be something they're not. I don't see the point in that. Marcus leaned against the nearby table, watching her with growing interest. She wasn't just some party crasher. There for the food. He knew that. There was a depth to her that he hadn't seen in most of the people who attended these kinds of events. They were all so eager to play their parts, to climb the social ladder, to manipulate each other for personal gain. But Lyra, she was different. What is it that you really want, Lyra? He asked, his voice tinged with genuine curiosity. He was starting to feel as if he was just scratching the surface of what was truly going on with her.
She didn't answer right away.
Instead, she took her time, looking around the room as if she were evaluating something. She had a way of moving through the crowd, seemingly unnoticed by everyone. Yet her presence was undeniable. People barely acknowledged her, but Marcus knew that there was far more to her story than met the eye. Finally, she met his gaze again.
You really want to know? She asked, her voice softer now, the playful edge gone for the moment.
I do, Marcus replied. He found himself captivated by her, wanting to understand what she was doing here, what her purpose was, and why she seemed so different from everyone else. Lyra sighed, setting her empty plate down on the table and wiping her hands on a napkin. The truth is, she said, her tone shifting to something more serious, I'm here for more than just the food. But the food, it's a nice break from the endless politics and games everyone else is playing. Marcus couldn't help but feel a shift in the air. There was an honesty in her voice now, a rawness that he wasn't expecting. Most people would have kept their guard up, but Lyra seemed unafraid to speak her truth. It was as if she wasn't concerned with what anyone thought of her. I'm part of something bigger than this, she continued, her eyes narrowing as she looked around the room. The empire that everyone here is so eager to be a part of, well, it's not all it seems. There are things going on behind the scenes that you wouldn't believe. Corruption, lies, manipulation. Marcus blinked in surprise. He had heard rumors, of course, whispers about the Empire's hold on the galaxy, the alliances it had made with the richest and most powerful beings. But to hear someone like Lyra speak so openly about it made him wonder just how much she knew.
You don't look like someone who belongs in that kind of world, Marcus said carefully. You seem different.
You're not playing by the same rules everyone else is. Lyra chuckled softly, almost bitterly.
That's because I'm not. I've seen the way people act when they think no one is watching.
I've seen the games they play, the deals they make. I've been a part of it too, but not anymore. Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her honesty.
So, what now? What is it that you're hoping to accomplish here?
What do you want from me?
Amore. Lyra met his gaze squarely, her expression serious.
I'm here to make things right.
To stop the Empire from controlling everything. People like you, powerful people, can make a difference.
But only if you know what's really going on. I didn't come here for food.
I came here for answers. Marcus was taken aback by her words.
He had always prided himself on being in control, on understanding the political landscape. But now, standing before him was someone who knew things he didn't. Things that could change everything he thought he understood about the galaxy. What do you mean? He asked, his voice suddenly quieter, more attentive. What do you know that I don't? I can't tell you everything just yet, she said, her tone guarded again. But I'll say this. The Empire isn't invincible.
They're vulnerable. There are cracks in the system, and people on the inside who want to bring it down.
But we need someone like you, someone with power, someone who can make decisions to help us. Marcus processed her words carefully. The empire she was speaking of was one he had always been taught to fear, to admire from a distance. But now, standing face to face with Lyra, he was starting to wonder whether that perception was just a facade. I don't know what you're asking of me, Lyra, Marcus said slowly. But I don't make decisions lightly. I'm not asking you to make a decision yet, Lyra replied quickly. But you can't stay in the dark forever. You need to see what's really happening if you want to understand what's at stake. There are bigger forces at play here than you realize.
Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had always known that the galaxy was a complex place, filled with dangerous politics and shifting alliances.
But the way Lyra was talking made him question everything he thought he knew. If she was telling the truth, if the Empire really was as corrupt as she said, then what did that mean for his own position?
I'm not sure I'm ready to dive into this kind of thing, Marcus said, his voice heavy with doubt. I've worked hard to get where I am.
I've built something here. I don't want to throw it all away.
Lyra's gaze softened. I get it, but you have to decide what's more important. Power and wealth, or doing what's right. This isn't about throwing your life away.
It's about saving it!
Marcus took a deep breath. He didn't know what to think, what to believe, but something in Lyra's eyes made him feel like there was no turning back. She was offering him a glimpse into a world he had never seen before, one that was darker, more complicated, and more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He stood in silence for a moment, lost in thought. The banquet, the guests, the opulence, it all seemed so far away now. All that mattered in that moment was Lyra's words, and somehow he knew that they were just the beginning.
So what happens now?
Marcus asked, his voice steady but with a new sense of purpose. Lyra smiled, the playful edge returning to her expression. Now we figure out how to bring the Empire down. Marcus stood in the quiet hallway of the grand banquet hall, his mind racing with the weight of what he had just learned. Lyra's words echoed in his mind, and for the first time in years, He felt a sense of unease. He had always been a man of control, a man who understood the intricacies of politics and business. He built his empire from nothing, learning the rules and using them to his advantage. But Lyra's revelations threatened everything he thought he knew. The empire, the one he had once admired from a distance, was not what it seemed. And now, she wanted him to help tear it down. His fingers tightened around the edge of the railing as he stared out at the stars through the large windows. The galaxy stretched out before him, endless, vast, and full of possibility. But beneath that shiny surface, something was rotting. Something dark and dangerous was lurking just out of sight. And Marcus knew that he couldn't ignore it any longer. He turned sharply as Lyra's figure appeared in the doorway behind him. Her presence was calm, almost soothing, but there was an intensity in her eyes that reminded him of the gravity of what they were about to do.
"I've been thinking," Marcus said, not turning to face her immediately. This
isn't a game. You're asking me to take on the Empire. Do you have any idea what that means? What it could cost?" She took a step closer, her footsteps soft but purposeful. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet yet resolute.
"I know exactly what it means, Marcus," she said, her words firm. "I've seen the Empire's cruelty up close.
I've watched it destroy countless lives. I've had to live with the consequences of its actions. And if we don't act, it will only get worse." Marcus could feel the weight of her words sinking in. He had known of the Empire's reach, of its iron grip on countless systems. But hearing it from someone who had experienced its tyranny firsthand was different. Lyra's calm exterior hid the pain she had suffered. She wasn't just speaking out of anger or rebellion. She was speaking out of a need for justice.
"But how do we even begin?" Marcus asked, finally turning to face her.
"You've said the Empire has cracks, but how do we expose them? How do we fight something that's so powerful, so entrenched in every part of the galaxy?" Lyra looked at him for a long moment, and then, with a small smile, she said, "That's where you come in." "Me?" "Yes," Lyra replied. "You have access to people, resources, information that most of us can only dream of. Your empire, your wealth. It's all part of the system we need to break down. But it's also the key to unlocking the Empire's weaknesses." Marcus frowned, confused. "Are you saying that I need to use my position against the Empire? Turn my own empire into a weapon?" "No," Lyra said softly. "Not a weapon. A tool. A tool to expose the truth, to uncover the corruption that runs deeper than anyone can imagine." She paused, letting the silence stretch between them. The sound of distant laughter and the hum of conversations from the banquet hall filled the space, but it felt miles away, as if it belonged to a different world entirely. Marcus was no longer sure where he stood. He had always prided himself on being the one in control, but now it felt as though he were standing on the edge of something far bigger than himself, something he couldn't control.
"Tell me more," Marcus said, his voice steady, though his heart raced.
He knew he was stepping into dangerous territory, but something in Lyra's eyes, the unshakable belief that change was possible, made him want to follow her, to learn more about this rebellion she spoke of.
"We need to start small," Lyra explained. "We can't take on the Empire all at once."
"It's too big, too powerful. But we can start by exposing its weaknesses. We need to find allies, people who are willing to stand with us. We need to gather information, intelligence that can bring the Empire to its knees."
Marcus felt a surge of determination. The gears in his mind were already turning, his business instincts kicking in.
He had built his empire by outsmarting his competitors, by knowing how to play the long game. If there was a way to bring down the Empire, he was the one who could find it.
"I can help with that," he said, his voice more confident now. "I have the connections." "The influence. I can get the information we need."
Lyra nodded. "Exactly."
We'll start by gathering intel on the key players, the people who hold the Empire together, the ones who have the power to make decisions.
We'll expose their corruption, their lies, and their ties to the Empire's darkest secrets. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a sense of purpose. His mind raced with possibilities. He had spent so many years building his empire, but now, the idea of dismantling it seemed strangely liberating. If he could bring down the Empire, if he could expose the truth, then maybe he could change the galaxy. Maybe he could give people like Lyra the justice they deserved.
But where do we start?
Marcus asked, his mind already moving toward the next step. Who do we target first? Lyra smiled, her eyes gleaming with quiet confidence.
We start with the ones closest to the throne, the ones who have the most to lose.
The people who think they can control everything. Once we expose their ties to the Empire, others will start to take notice. Marcus felt the weight of her words. The Empire's grip was strong, but it wasn't invincible. If they could uncover its weaknesses, if they could find the cracks, then maybe they could break it wide open. They spent the next few hours going over the details of their plan. Lyra explained who the key figures were, the politicians, the military leaders, and the business moguls who had their fingers in the Empire's pie. Marcus began to see the web of corruption that stretched out before them, tangled and complicated, but with a clear path to the heart of the Empire. They would need to move carefully, step by step, gathering allies along the way. But if they played their cards right, they could topple the Empire from within. As the night wore on, Marcus found himself more determined than ever. The banquet had long since ended, and the guests had dispersed, but he and Lyra remained in the quiet corridor, strategizing. The Empire had taken so much from people like her, people like him. But now, they had a chance to take it back. Lyra stood, ready to leave. "We'll need to be careful," she warned, her voice serious. "The Empire won't go down without a fight. We'll be up against forces that want to protect the status quo. But together, we can make it happen." Marcus nodded, his resolve firm. "I'm in." Lyra smiled. "Good."
We're going to change the galaxy, Marcus, and it starts now.
The first step in their plan was deceptively simple. Marcus, with his vast resources and influence, would begin to use his networks to gather intelligence on the key figures of the Empire. He knew he had to move quickly. The longer they waited, the more likely it was that someone would catch wind of what they were doing. The Empire had eyes everywhere, especially in the most powerful circles of society. In the weeks that followed, Marcus threw himself into the work. He began reaching out to old contacts, people he had once considered allies, but now saw as potential pawns in the larger game. These were the men and women who had helped him build his empire. Politicians, military leaders, and corporate moguls. They were the ones who held the strings that controlled the galaxy's power. Now, they would help him tear it all down. But Marcus knew that this process would not be easy. Some of these contacts had been loyal to the Empire for decades, and they would not give up their position of power without a fight. He had to be strategic, calculating. He couldn't afford to tip his hand too soon. Lyra was there to guide him, keeping a watchful eye on their progress. She had her own network, smaller but more focused, made up of those who had been hurt by the Empire's rule. She helped Marcus dig deeper, using the intel they gathered to pinpoint where the Empire's vulnerabilities lay. They tracked movements, uncovered secret meetings, and followed the money trails that led to the most corrupt individuals in the Empire's inner circle. Over time, Marcus began to see the cracks Lyra had spoken of. The Empire's foundation was shaky, held together by greed, fear, and manipulation. The more they uncovered, the more they realized just how much power the Empire had concentrated in the hands of a few. People who thought they could control the galaxy's fate. People who believed that their wealth and influence made them untouchable. But they were wrong. One evening, as Marcus sat in his private office, the weight of his thoughts pressing on him, Lyra arrived with more news. She looked determined, more so than usual. There was a fire in her eyes that told him they were about to take their next big step. "We found something," she said, her voice low. Something big. Marcus stood up, his heart picking up pace. What do you mean? There's a deal in the works, Lyra continued.
A massive one!
It's going to shift the balance of power in the galaxy, and the people involved. She paused, her gaze narrowing. They've been hiding it from everyone. Marcus's pulse quickened. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. They had been slowly chipping away at the Empire's facade, but now they had a chance to strike directly at its core.
What is it?
Marcus asked, leaning forward, eager to hear the details. It's an alliance, Lyra said. A secret one, between several of the Empire's top officials and a group of corporations. They're planning to consolidate their power even further, to take control of entire sectors of the galaxy. If this goes through, it will be nearly impossible to stop them. Marcus clenched his fists. This was the opportunity they had been looking for. If they could expose this deal, if they could reveal the truth to the galaxy, the Empire would lose its grip. The people would rise up against them.
We need to move fast, Marcus said, his voice steady but urgent. We need to make sure this deal never happens.
Lyra nodded, her expression resolute.
I've already started making moves. I've got people in place to leak the information to the right channels.
But we can't do this alone. We need allies, people who are willing to stand up to the Empire. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. This was it. This was the moment they had been building toward. But it wasn't going to be easy. There were too many powerful people involved. They would do everything in their power to protect the deal, to silence anyone who stood in their way.
We can't just leak the information, Marcus said, a new realization dawning on him. We need to make sure the Empire feels the pressure.
We need to hit them where it hurts, where they least expect it. Lyra raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his shift in strategy. What are you thinking? Marcus walked to the large window of his office and stared out at the city below. He could feel the weight of his empire in the palm of his hand. But now, that same empire was going to be the tool he used to bring it all down.
We need to expose their corruption publicly, Marcus said, turning to face Lyra. And I mean really expose it. Show the galaxy the truth about what they've been doing behind closed doors.
We'll use everything we've gathered. The secret meetings, the money trails, the alliances. Lyra's eyes sparkled with understanding. You're right. The Empire relies on the perception of control. If we can shatter that perception, we can break them. And if we do it right, they won't be able to stop it.
Marcus felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about tearing down the Empire, it was about creating something better.
A galaxy free from the iron fist of those who sought to control it for their own gain. But he knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger. They were about to expose the darkest secrets of the most powerful people in the galaxy, and they would stop at nothing to protect themselves. We can't waste any time, Marcus said.
Get the information to the media. Let it spread.
The more people know, the harder it will be for them to hide it.
Lyra nodded, already pulling out her communicator.
I'll make it happen, but once it's out there, there's no going back.
Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The decision had been made.
There was no turning back now. Within hours, the information was leaked to the press. Articles began to appear in media outlets across the galaxy, detailing the Empire's corruption and the shady dealings that had been taking place behind the scenes. The galaxy was stunned. The public outcry was immediate and intense. People were furious. They had trusted their leaders, and now they were faced with the reality that those very leaders had betrayed them. But as the news spread, so did the Empire's reaction. The leaders of the Empire, the ones behind the deal, quickly moved to suppress the information. They tried to discredit the sources, calling it all a lie. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Marcus watched as the Empire began to crumble, piece by piece. He knew that they were just getting started. This was only the beginning of a much larger battle. "Now we fight," Lyra said, her voice steady with resolve. Marcus nodded, his heart racing with the knowledge that they had taken the first step toward freedom. But he also knew that the battle was far from over. The Empire would not go down without a fight. They would have to be smart, strategic, and relentless if they wanted to see this through to the end. "This is just the beginning," Marcus said. "We've exposed their corruption, but now we need to make sure the galaxy sees the truth. We need to show them that the Empire isn't invincible. We need to show them that they can fight back." Lyra smiled, her eyes full of fire. "We will, together." And with that, they set their sights on the next step of their plan. The fight for the galaxy's future had only just begun. They had made their first strike, but there was much more to come. They would keep pushing forward, never stopping, until the Empire's grip was broken and the galaxy was free.